I'm now speaking with Junior Pouchet. The name Junior Pouchet is synonymous with pan, the instrument, and he has had a great role to play in his history, and we're going to chat with him about his role and what he continues to still do, although not in Trinidad, but in the United States, in Orlando, Florida. Junior, thank you very much for talking with me.
It's a pleasure, Ron.
All right, Junior Pouchet, I remember as a little boy, as a young fella, I would say, 12, 13, 14, 1962, a band by the name of Silver Stars came out in the area where my family were living, came out in Robert Street, Colville Street, Cipriani Boulevard, in that area, Silver Stars. And the young people of the day, it was a real treasure to know of Silver Stars, to hear of Silver Stars, and boast of an association of Silver Stars. And to me, that made the band very distinctive. Your name, you were one of the leaders of the band. Would you care to tell me a little about that?
Well, actually, it was an era, I would say in the early 50s, you know, when Silver Stars came into being. They formed around 1950 under the name of Valentinos. And this was just formed by a few college boys and their immediate associates. Now, at that particular time, you'd find that there was a sort of social standing here where that the boys that invented the pan, you know, like the All Stars and Hilliard and, you know, Hill 60 and you go on and on, they sort of treated us as like outcasts. You know, we were just little, they used to call us little white boys, you know, college boys trying to play pan. On the other hand, you found that we got pressures from our peers, for instance, our fathers, and they didn't like the idea too much, you know, because they felt that this was associated with not really the class of fellas you should. So in the end, really, we found that the best thing to do was to get a bunch of college boys, a bunch of fellas by yourself, and get some second-hand pants from Ellie Manet or somebody, and have some little thing going in your yard, you know. And it worked from there. And at that particular time, there were a few bands, Silver Stars, Dixieland particularly, that really catered to this sort of middle class sort of thing where mothers wouldn't let their daughters play unless they knew the boys in a band sort of thing. And, you know, it went from there. And there's a particular incident I remember that I'd like to say right now. Around 1952, I was going to St. Mary's College at the time. And I remember the then principal, Father Brett, you know, calling us all in the big yard one day, the college yard, 1,600 college boys, and he made a speech in so much as saying that he understands there are few college boys participating in pan activities, and he'd like to let it know straight and clear that should anyone be found playing pan, they'd be expelled. You know, it was as serious as that. And we persisted, you know, like my father would tell me every year, well, this is your last year. I mean, this is a pastime. This is a little fun in the back of the yard, but you want to get serious in life, you got to cut this out, you know. But we persisted, and we kept going at it, you know, and finally we got a little recognition in making our contribution.
But what do you think made them so scared to allow their children to play in pan?
Well, I don't think it's actually the instrument. It was never really the instrument, but the association in those days, you know, I remember as a small boy living in Woodford Street, and at the bottom of the street was Alexander's Ragtime Band, which was supposed to be one of the first. And you'd pass the yard, and the guys would be gambling and cussing and getting on, and you know, your parents seeing that all steel bands at that time carried that particular element, you know. It was born out of what we call today the ghetto sort of thing, that they felt that they wanted the children to be a little above that. So I couldn't really blame them at the time because, you know, pans have changed and the steel bands have changed tremendously now. In those days, every band had about five bar johns, you know, and Invaders against Casablanca and, you know, things like that. And they were particularly worried about boys, their children getting into that sort of, you know, tribulation, as they call it, you know, at the time. But as the instrument improved and the steel band was accepted as such, I think what happened is that they gradually began to accept the fact that it's music you're playing, and not really, it's not who you mix with, it's what you play, you know. And it went on and on like that until it finally leveled off, you know, to what it is today.
But I clearly remember Silver Stars was a band that really, like you say, was it brought the era of pan at a point of discussion and debate by parents. And, you know, whether to let their kids play pan or not. Silver Stars is an example. It's a good band, good boys going into it. So I will let my daughter or my son play in the band.
That was very much in evidence. I mean, I could remember in the early days of Silver Stars, you know, around the 60s, still at that time, you know, parents would come to register their daughters, or, you know, in the band, and personally say, Junior, you know, my daughter is playing, you know, keep eye on her for me, sort of thing. You know, it might be laughable now, but, you know, it was quite a thing. They didn't want their daughters to play in any and every band, but then, you know, it was the going thing. Mrs. So-and-so daughter was playing Silver Stars, so maybe my daughter could play. And they had a nice cream. You found that when Starlift came into being also, you find that the girls of Bishop Anderson High School used to play with those boys, and then the girls from the convent used to play with the boys from St. Mary's. So it was a little cliquage, and at that time, the youngsters very much was interested in pan, you know.
What kind of pressures you felt being in that situation at that time?
Well, both. I felt, first of all, the pressure of not being accepted per se as a pan man, or regardless of what you did, regardless of how you strummed the pans, you know. It was never accepted. I mean, the steel band men of the day didn't accept it, you know. Mm-hmm. And that pressure in itself was particularly hard to me, because I felt that I was playing the instrument and trying to make a contribution, arrangement-wise in music. And just because the color of your skin wasn't right, you know, the fellas who invented the pan didn't want to accept you for saying, and it wasn't, you were not the right color, you don't have the right blood, you really don't know about pan. Mm-hmm. So that was one pressure in itself. And the second pressure was that you had this sense of, well, you're playing music, and you have a band, and you have an X amount of people in it, and they expect you to keep a certain level, you know, of social standing on the other hand, you know, which was very, very difficult to do, because it might have started off with a few college boys, you know, a couple of Chinese boys, your Syrian boy, your Portuguese boy, yeah? But it soon became evident that that wasn't the end of it. You know, we had to accept players who can play pan, and the criteria we use is really the fact that once guys were not into anything that would create any sort of you know, offensive thing for the band, we accepted them as such, you know, black, white, red, green, or blue. And that's how the whole thing broke down. So that's it, you know.
Right. Well, really, I could imagine it perhaps was a really rough period for you guys. What special achievements do you feel that Silver Stars accomplished in its time?
Well, as a leader and arranger at the time, as a small boy, you know, I could have walked around Carnival Day, and I knew all the bands. I knew all by just the color of the pans. You know, I was really an aficionado at the time as a little boy, 12 years old. And when I started to beat pan, you know, everything Invaders did, you did, you know, everything Ellie or Manet or Birdie Manet did, or what the boys at the time did, or Patsy Heen from Casablanca, or, you know, Roach from, you know, the band up in Boys Town, things like that. You found that you were very much motivated by what they did. You wanted to be a triple hit or just a good B of what they played that was good enough. But somewhere down the line, I got the impression that, well, you know, my own creativity came out. I didn't want to strum like how Invaders are strumming in their pants anymore. I felt a different need. You know, I felt a need to change some more keys, you know, to put in different introductions rather than just follow what some of the big bands are doing. And I think at that breaking point, I would say around the late 50s, it began to emerge. I'd say really that I was really one of the first guys, as far as I remember, to play my own composition in a festival at the time. Let's go back to 1959 in Astor Theatre, when we were going for the Renaissance Trophy, and at that time I composed a tune called Russian Merengue, you know. And it was such a touchy point. I didn't even tell the fellas on the band that I wrote it. I told them I picked it up from some Venezuelan station or something like that, because they wouldn't accept it if I said I wrote it, you know. And then in 1960, we were the first band to really bring a classic in the festival with virtues from Jocelyn, you know. which created such an impasse, you know. I won't say a wrong word impasse, but a gold rush onto the classics, I call it. And little different innovations, like with the first band in the festival to bring 2 sets of 6 bass, you know, all in those days it was, you had a star bass man, and he was the man that carried the group. But we started to introduce a more orchestral.
Okay, as we were saying, Junior, the name Junior Pouchet really became synonymous with achievement, with high standards, and these things that you're labeling certainly make this very cognizant.
Yeah, well, I think it came around from the fact that in those days, early days, you know, a band was known by its style, you know, and I always felt that if you could hear a band, you know, behind your back and be able to say, well, this band is Highlanders, or this band is Invaders, or this band is, that band has achieved something. And we developed a sound of our own, you know. You know, maybe everybody didn't agree with the song, but we made that contribution, a sound of our own, and we were sort of innovative. I was always a fellow at that time to be very, you know, going ahead with some little thing that I didn't see done. And it went along like that. Like I was always from a small boy, I was always a great admirer of the classics, you know. So when it came to the time of introducing classics to Pan, I mean, I knew quite a lot of tunes, you know, to go ahead and arrange. And I think at that particular era and time, the contribution we made to some classics, you know, playing it on Pan and things, really created a good impact with the audience at large.
Mm-hmm. Would you say that bands like Dixieland were able to develop a style similar to yours because of your achievement?
No, I would say not. I mean, Dixieland had their own style. It was their own band, similar to us in a certain amount of. Some of the boys went to college and they were in Belmont and we were in Woodbrook, sort of thing, you know. But other than that, the bands were of different stylings, and I remember that they won a festival really, you know, in 1960. So they made their own achievements, you know. Curtis Peer, you know, was a great driver behind that band, and they made their own achievements musically. Yeah.
Silver Stars, did they ever get in any violent encounters in those days with the other bands? Did any band look upon them to take advantage of them per se? Or if not, how were they able to evade that kind of thing?
Well, it was very difficult at first, you know, because at that time, every time guys got together to play in a steel band or a little crowd of boys together, all of a sudden they feel they're a badge on or something, you know. They want to prove themselves. But I was able to steer the band clear of that. We had this sort of where we play music and we go anywhere. And it was manifested many times when that sooner or later we came to know as the little boys that play good pan. And some of the best barge-on bands in the day, you know, you'll go to town on Desperados and Tokyo and things would, you know, give you half of the road, you know, they wouldn't run you off, you know. And this was a healthy respect. They just knew this band was not a threat to them in any sort of physical, violent way. These little boys play music, right, let them, you know, let them have their fun and pass, you know. And that went very well. We only had really trouble in our own area, you know. You know, Invaders always used to give us a hard time, you know. Tuesday night, they felt a few bottles in the barn and things. And it was out of fun, really. Not that we a threat to them, but they like to see these little children run, you know. So they had a lot of fun in that respect. But generally, I say that the bands were considered the real terrible bands of those days. Gave us quite a nice respect, you know. We never had problems of fighting anybody. In fact, you know, we always sort of retreated.
Right. So it was a situation where like Desperados would come down the street and you coming up and so, I mean, would you ever imagine that happening today, the size of the band?
It will be a little difficult today with all those sort of big contraptions the bands have today. But it used to happen a long time where one band coming up, one band going up, you know. And you know, it's you know, you get some really touch and go moments there, you know, different flags and nobody know who's going to give way and all this sort of thing. But we were able to manage it all by just having just ignoring. And I think that I've always done that with some of the most intimidating bands, you know. I never treated them as barge-ons. I always spoke to them as fellow pan men, you know. And that went a long way with these fellas that you tell them about Pan, you talk about Pan, and you don't show any, whether you really feel it inside or not, you don't show them any, that you're not intimidated, you just go about it,
So you entertained discussions with other Pan men during that time? I mean, you were in meetings with them, you spoke with them and that sort of thing?
Yeah, for instance, in 1960, I was president of the then Steelpan Association. I was picked to be president. And I made a statement once, which went over very unpopular with the fellows at the time, but I was just being honest. When I was president, I said that the mentality of the average steel band man, had been surpassed by the instrument of pan. In other words, he was producing fine instruments, but his mentality is keeping him back with all his fighting and everything. I was very unpopular at the time that statement was made, but I was just trying to be honest with the situation. And it improved as years went by.
But do you feel that it is still the same way today? Oh,
definitely not. I mean, the steel bands today, you have a cross-section of society in the steel bands, And this have been evident for years, you have from custom officers to who beating pan, college, any sort of people. Pan has become the instrument. I mean, look, I was pleasantly surprised in the school competitions, the young girls and boys are really playing, beautiful music.
Right. Okay, I want some more discussions on that topic, but I'm trying to follow a path now with Silver Stars. How long did the band exist, and why did it cease being operating?
Okay, the band was in existence approximately from 1950 under the name of Valentinos, But it changed their name in 1954 to Silver Stars. And that's about the time I became captain, lead of the band. And one of the things that caused that sort of breakdown in the original membership was that the band, they were practicing somewhere in Warner Street at the time, and somebody complained about steel band music, which was 7 o'clock at night. And the police came and just kind of took away 6 guys and take all the instruments, put it in a Black Maria and things. We talking about 7 p.m. at night. And it was a landmark case, these boys, at the time the parents held respective jobs in the community. And they felt they were just having fun. And here it was the following morning in the courthouse, And a judge at that time said steel band music before 10 p.m. is not a nuisance. And from that point, steel bands knew where they stood.
Could you remember what the judge's name was?
I particularly can't remember.
But what year was this again?
This would have to be approximately around 1952, 53. I'd say around 53 that happened, yeah.
So up to what time did Silver Stars go?
Yeah, well, we stopped playing around 74, and it was mainly due to the fact that since 1968, I got a contract to go to Bermuda, and I played in Bermuda for 2 years and come back for the carnival and arrange for the band. Then I went to New York in 70, Then I went to LA in 71, And then I got a contract with Disney World at the ending of 71. And what had happened at that time, the Coca-Cola people at Canning's Industries had sponsored the band in 66, and they liked being sponsored the band. But without my driving force there years as a disciplinarian in PAN and membership and sticking to the rules and so, they found a noticeable depreciation in discipline and everything, and they didn't like the direction the band was going. So it came to that point in 74 where after several unsuccessful committees tried to run the band, that the band was definitely deteriorating to a point where it was also almost shameful to say, well, this is the original Silver Stars we're talking about here. So I took the decision at that time that unless I'm able to put a greater input into Silver Stars as a group, and unless they are fellas really in a position to keep this as a tight unit, it's best we stop the band until further such time. So that's exactly what happened, that span.
Okay, so the band is off in 74, 75, around there. Now you are in Orlando, Florida, and still carrying on Silver Stars in a smaller concept.
Yeah, well, definitely. For instance, we only have 6 fellas at Disney World, but originally we had 11 in Los Angeles. But you find that in the States, so I suppose elsewhere, that they're not really interested in a big band song. You know, it's orchestral, 25 tenors and 14-second pans. You know, becomes a white elephant very soon. You know, it's not economical for the members. Nobody could hire such a large orchestra. So what you got to do is sooner it becomes more pertinent to have a small group with a representative song. I mean, you're not trying to say, well, this is exactly what Panorama Band would sound like. If you want the real thing, go to Trinidad. But at the same time, this is steel band music, authentic out of Trinidad. So that's how we've been able to survive as a group. Most of the guys being original Silver Stars members, survive as a group and let it be, you know, economically feasible.
Would you care to call their names?
Yeah, we have Kenneth Payne, who is also is the son of Kitchener, Lord Kitchener. He has always played with us for years, you know. And we have Leon Jones, originally from St. Anne's. He's our bass player. Then we have Carl Sampson, originally from Cascade. These are all Silver Stars boys, you know. And we have Eric Marshall. He's a local resident drummer from Orlando. And Kenrick Lansing, he's from South, formerly from the Trinidad Maestro Steel Band.
Playing with them, continuing this process, it must give you a sense of satisfaction in your life that you're able to live a life with a dream that you perhaps most wanted all the time.
Yeah, it's a catch-22 situation, though. What happens here is that you never realize that one day you live, you know, off a pan. You know, you get a good salary and you have good benefits and perks going with the job. You know, actually beating pan. But there's a little frustration point as an arranger musically. It sets in from time to time where you just feel for a big band song. You know, you arrange for a small band, but you have ideas going in different directions. You don't have the instruments to cover it. So you know, you gain something, but you lose something. And we make a living. We represent Trinidad as a Trinidad Steel Band per se, but really the big band arrangements that I could have done, like the years going past, I can't really do it with a small group. You know?
When you see people like Bugsy Sharp and all these guys doing kinds of things, what does it do to you?
Oh well, it's almost like a, you know, it's injection, you know, a rejuvenation when you see things being done at that level. For instance, Bugsy is very prominent back in Trinidad, you know, has been a composer, panist, player, everything have you, arranger and so. And they have some other boys overseas, you know, like Otello Molino, who is very in the top jazz circles all over the world, you know, doing his thing. Then you have Robert Greenidge, you know, who is really about the best technician in Pantry, you know. And then we have a fellow doing a tremendous amount of work in Europe for many years, and Rudy Tulef-Smith, you know, who is into jazz circles in Europe also. All these are Trinidadian boys doing their own little orbits, you know. But then you have what could be considered, you know, individual panmanship outside. And then, but if you want a real big song, you know, it's back to Trinidad and All Stars, Renegades, Phase 2, what have you. You know.
You're satisfied from where you started to see where Pan has gone today then?
Oh yes, and it's going even further. I think there's one thing I like to be a little critical of, though, is the guys like Bugsy and Ray Hallman, who are actually composing for Pan for quite a few years, you know, that they seem to separate themselves from the rest of the composers for Carnival, you know, like if it's almost like if composing for Pan is a union struggle against the Calypsonians, you know, which should not be. I think that composers are all in their own right, you know. A fella could compose, he's a singer, next one compose, he's an organist, the next compose, he's a pianist, you know. You compose a tune for the Trinidad public and to express yourself. It shouldn't be them against us sort of thing, you know, it should be just part of the composite picture of composers from Trinidad.
Do you feel that they sort of tend to overwork themselves or overextend themselves, arranging for 3 and 4 bands, some for 10 bands? At one time, I think last year, Bugsy had been arranging for something like 10 bands.
Well, this is an interesting point, and it has two trends of thought here, but then, you know, you have to look at it. I'll explain one. For instance, when I used to arrange in the 60s, I wanted a few fellas arrange for more than one band, you know. I arranged for Quintups, I arranged for Triple E. I even was one of the original arrangers of Renegades when they tried to be decent, you know, they got a sponsor. So you find that you arrange for bands, but then in those days there was no money involved. It was just for the love of pan, and fellas needed help, that band needed help, and they came to you and you said, "Right, I had time, let's do it." And you know, when we finish, we just have a bottle of rum and sit down and talk about it and hope we win something, you know. But so I'm glad in this respect that today, you know, and I give them 6 weeks or 8 weeks. I mean, you know, some of these arenas can make $80,000, you know, just by doing that. And I'm glad to see pan is paying off, you know. I mean, fellas could work for 2 months and just sort of sit down and regenerate themselves and extend. On the other hand, what has become the norm is that none of the bands they arrange for ever musically of the standard that their own band. No other third, fourth, or fifth band has ever been able to come and be the first band, their home yard. And it's something that I think that subconsciously, the players of those other bands and their sponsors subconsciously accept that, you know. They pay these guys a certain amount of range. But what happened is this, what they're paying for is respectability. Once Boogsy arrange for you, well, you have a chance of being the final 12 bands. Once Jitsamo will arrange for you, you're going to get a little respect. You know, Jitsamo on the banner, and you know you're going to get a good thing. But there's no way that they expect that that arrangement is going to beat Renegades or that arrangement is going to beat Phase 2. But I think they accept that because of the fact that, well, even without that, we don't stand a chance. So it's best get a piece of the cake than at all. You know?
Do you feel the judges could be a part of that kind of feeling?
Well, it's difficult to say. I think that too much of the stress is placed on Panorama. Then it becomes an economical thing here, where that's the only time the steel bands are getting any money again. They're not playing in fets, nobody's hiring them. They're not on the roads in any numbers to vie for any honors. So it's either win this set of money at Panorama or not. So they cut an arm and a leg just to get at Panorama, and then the whole thing goes after that, which is not really right. Eh? It is not.
Documentation of the history of Pan, the activities of Pan, is so limited. Why do you feel that has occurred?
First of all, the diversified, what you might call commentary on Pan, where according to who you speak to give you a different story, and there several things come to play here where, for instance, in the case of Spree Simon, trying to say, well, Spree Simon, honor him for being the first Pan man. Nobody ever said, well, Spree Simon represented at his time the very first pioneers, you know. It wasn't only him, there were fellas in Gonzales, there were fellas all over the place. At that time, sort of beaten out, you know. So maybe one fella might start a Pan a week or 2 weeks before, but we're talking about an era and a time where it's very difficult to distinguish who really hit the first note and who really made the first 7 points. And to make it out of one man is great for his memory, but I think there were a lot of fellas at that time, from as far as I understood, that made their contribution at that time, and they have not been recognized, you know. From there, you find that coming along the line that everybody got in the act. Now, we go into the next thing, which I like to mention, of standardization of the instrument. It has been the cry and hue for almost 30 years now, as far as I remember, in 1956 and 60, where these adjudicators came out as judges and stressed the fact for standardization. Now, there's a school of thought say, well, how can you standardize something which is still growing? You know, it needs to be expanded upon. Fine. But I think there's enough intelligent people in the steel band movement now who agree pans must be standardized. And one analogy I popularly like to make is this, that if your son went to piano lessons, the age 6 years old, and you took him to a visit in Japan to see Tokyo Disneyland, and he saw a piano in somebody's house, he could go and play. Here we have the best steel band men in the island, in All Stars Yard, can't go up just a quarter mile into Renegades Yard and play anything, regardless of their repertoire. I mean, it's almost really laughable if you come to think in this day and age that the top tuners and the top arrangers cannot sit down on a table like this and say, well, listen, we think the G should be here. Let's all go with F here. You know, let's beat this thing around the table. We know it has to be done. So what has happened is this is one of the things that has hampered this trend of thought and getting that done because everybody's trying to win Panorama. So why should I sit down and discuss with you how I get my harmonics better than you when I have to meet you at the end of the year to go in for a $22,000 prize, you know? So 10 tuners and arrangers and band members tend to still want to keep what they have to themselves and don't show the next man down the road. Let them do their thing, but we have to win on tonal quality at the end of the year. I mean, we don't want these other fellas have it, you know?
Right, right. The world of Pan is a real a heavy one, a big one. It has suffered greatly, but I do believe the horizons is there, and we can certainly go very far with it. What do you feel can attribute and help to this in terms of the nation's acceptance of the various things that Pan can do and that has done, and give credit to Pan for this?
Well, I think that just like what you're doing now, that the history is going to be recorded, you know, and beaten over and over again as the years goes on. Now that we have this more consciousness about culture and so, which is good. But I'm a little more worried about the future as far as the Trinidad of the identity of the Trinidad steel band is concerned. Because there are so many steel bands all over the world now, everybody's getting into it and everybody's making the money off it and everybody's going and getting better and better. The fact we're going to remain is as time goes on, the steel band instrument is going to come just like how the piano or the violin or the trumpet is. If I was to ask anybody, or you for that matter, most probably you'll know, the average person in the road, who invented the piano? They won't be able to say. They will say, who invented the trumpet? Nobody can say. But everybody knows a trumpet. Who invented the piano? Nobody. The violin. Nobody could tell you. But everybody knows a violin. Everybody knows a trumpet. The day is going to come when nobody knows that Trinidad invented the pan. Pan is going to be all over the place, being played in all sort of aggregates of musicians, whether it's calypso, whether it's string music, whether it's classical, whatever it is, and nobody would ever know. The only thing to put the pan on the market, really, so I say very much is compositions for the steel band, by particularly Trinidadian composers. For instance, we have a lot of distinguished judges that sit down there, come and judge the steel bands, you know, responding place, so that should have been a different chord. But nobody's contributing really, other than that. And here we have our best arrangers beating their brains out for 10 minutes on a savannah, and then the music is lost after. I've seen a good trend in last festival. Bugsy and Jit Samro have been doing their own works, and this is what we should encourage more. And further to that, I feel that we still have a master day, what you might call mentality as far as the pans are concerned, because here we have Pan Trinbago, and we have this, and we don't wear shirt and tie anymore. We show jacks, and we have shown our own identity. But yet, whenever we have to come and play a classical or festival for pans, we have to pick an old tune out of the dust shelves of Europe, you know. So we are chained to a colonial thinking that unless our bands play some classic by, you know, somebody Von Supi or somebody somewhere, that we're not with it, or we're not going to be accepted, which I think is a chink in our armor, really. We have to get beyond that thinking and say, just like how the Bach Festival in Germany or Chopin in the Warsaw Piano Concerto, where they attend music for a particular country. And I mean, the Bach Festival don't play Bugsy tune. They don't play Kitchener or Sparrow. Why, when we have our festival, we have to be playing their music? It's really a paradox here when you come to think of it. We call ourselves a third world nation with a third world instrument, but we are chained to a colonial past with this sort of musical approach.
The trend of taking Pan into the younger generations, the school children, would you say it's a good thrust?
Oh, it's excellent. I mean, watching on the school bands and the sort of penmanship that those school youngsters play, it's beautiful. there is a big question mark. The paradox of it is this, that they come out for the school competitions, and many of these youngsters play in the panorama with older members, but that's the end of it. You don't see them on the road. You would figure with that sort of infusion with youngsters at an earlier age than how it was in earlier times, that the bands would be filled on the streets. Steel bands would mean there'd be no lack of members. But these still youngsters would play pan up to a certain time, and then they'll go and play in a DJ band for carnival. So there is some point here that we're not analyzing properly. Where is this slippage going? We have more players than ever before, more bands than ever before, and when the carnival come and time to express ourselves for the love of pan, we don't see anybody wrong. Everybody's running to DJs, running to play in other brass bands and so.
Do you see a need for a consultation on pan at this point?
Oh, definitely. Not one consultation. I mean.
A national attitude and national consultation.
Oh yes, we definitely need to get the best brains in the pan business to sit down, begin to come with some sobering, decisions, and let's go from there, and cut out of this pettiness. We are letting Panorama rule our lives, letting Panorama get the best of us, distort our thinking. In other words, then, why cannot we standardize an instrument? What are we doing to our youngsters? Each school has a different pan, so you tell them, learn the national culture, learn the music. We're glad you're second pan, or we're glad you play the double tenor, which is great, and the child feels great and they play. And when they come out, and the parents go to Belmont to live, the child can't play the pan in the band. It's a relearning process. I think is disadvantageous to the young kids to be having to go through that system.
Is there anything else you would like to add as we continue our recording?
Well, I think I've covered most of the points. I mean, there's a lot of things I could say, but I just responded to the question.
All right, but like I said, I do agree with you that we should sort of identify a national consensus of us playing our music, because it was beautiful to hear Bugsy Sharp's playing Bugsy Sharp's music. If more rangers could be able to do that kind of thing, another area is perhaps the attitude of the average pan man. Although we have a fusion of middle-class people into pan, somehow I believe that there's a national attitude that still tends to keep the steel band man into the gutter area, or just a little above the gutter area.
Well, I don't live here all through the year as before. I must say that the sort of respect given the pan man away is tremendous. He's treated as a musician, an artist in his own right. Here we tend to break it down into different societies, different areas, different groups, and everybody accept the total musical product. But then the people who make that product, don't tend to get along with each other. There's room for improvement all over. But two points I like to make here again. For instance, you talk about people socially in the band. I find a lot of bands are pretty well integrated. That never happened before. And
more women, for example.
Oh, definitely. I mean, I was really astounded for the last few years the amount of girls and women participating head and head with the boys in this, and that's a healthy sign. I mean, that in itself. Those girls could never go into a steel band yard before. I mean, their mothers just wouldn't let them. So to see that alone, regardless of what band it is in itself, it shows that there is a greater respect for the pan and for the yard, and what went on in the yard before, is not going on anymore. The whole thing has been uplifted. And I must say that sponsorship definitely has played a tremendous amount should take a great credit for getting the steel bands to a musical level, and hedging them in the right direction, because I knew many sponsors used to tell some of the bands, say, well, listen, we don't mind sponsoring you and this, but we don't want to hear you guys in any fights, sort of cool it. And that really began to make a difference. And you found that once the fellas could start expressing themselves musically, there was no need to go around beating up people again anymore, because there was a pride. And that goes in any social level. You know, some of these fellas without jobs would be, I mean, so and so a wrong tongue, but give them a responsible self-respect. I mean, they change almost overnight.
Even I remember just a couple of years ago, the late Rudolph Charles with the Desperados. I knew perhaps 20 years ago, if this had happened, when he contested the CDC's decision in terms of his band playing and took the case to court, it showed a total change in band's attitude, where earlier on they would fight, and now they're taking a different platform, taking it to court.
Yeah. Well, it sure beats fighting, you know, and you know, many times it could get a little bogged down, you know, that if the judges say this and you have 4 or 5 bands going to court, I mean, what's really it is after all? I mean, is it fun for Carnival? I mean, we have all stayed in the yard 2 months to practice anyhow. But is the spirit of Carnival there when we have to be going to court every minute? So it's debatable, but as you said, the platform which it took is much different to where before.
Bands are in North America. Bands coming up from Trinidad to North America and other places. Do you feel it's a good thing, it's good for Pan in general to invite steel bands, have steel bands from Trinidad visit the North American shows?
Oh, definitely. There's one point I like to make, though, that I've found that a lot of the bands come up. Their first thing they do, well, we're going to the States, okay, let's learn up 95 classics, you know. And this is a shortfall, really, in your thinking, because what happens is this: you go and play for American audience or European audience, in the case of me, and you go on tour, and everybody say, well, that's a good work of Beethoven, for that matter, or Tchaikovsky, great. But we want to hear your music. It always comes back.
Right, that's what the people are saying. We want to hear your music.
We want to hear what your music, what these instruments are made for. You know, we want to hear that. You know, in other words, then we're accustomed to hearing the New York Philharmonic with Zubin Mehta, or you know, or the Los Angeles, you know, and Leonard Bernstein and boys. You know, we don't really need an instrument trying to come up to that standard and we finding faults with it. It's good. You know, boys from the Caribbean playing Caribbean music, great. Okay, get on with your music now. Let's hear Panorama arrangement. Let's hear what your nation is all about. And I think that when these guys go on tour, they realize that sooner or later they have to end up playing calypsos to the people, because this is what the people are really interested in. It's like we invited a reggae band, Steel Pulse for that matter, or somebody else to come play a chamber orchestra, and all they wanted to play was Bugsy Sharp, you know, I'm feeling nice kind of thing. And we say, well, it's okay, but we have Bugsy to play that here. Give us something of what you play, you know. So that is a point that I think we have to, it's going back to the mentality of thinking again, where we have this little shortfall, and unless we play this tremendous amount of classics, people won't accept us as musicians. We got to break that. Definitely got to break that.
Listen, Junior, it was really interesting going back into history of Pan with you, and I'm glad that you took the time out to help us document this.
There's 2 short points I just forgot, that Silver Star, their contribution was the first band really in 1963 to ever win Band of the Year as a steel band. And we came second also the following year in 64, and 5th the following year in Band of the Year run-ins. It's a small point, but I think it showed that the tremendous amount of power that steel bands had in those days as far as masquerade and thing, and what it has become today. You know, the way it looks now, like that record might never be broken for quite a long time again. Hopefully, it will come to that day again when a steel band will flood the streets with masqueraders, be able to do something like that, you know.
Do you feel that the efforts made on this past Saturday was any helpful towards that direction?
It's a help. What I say though, it needs a little more management in that direction. For instance, the schools already have school bands, so the school kids are accustomed to the bands. The band should be placed, you know, from corner to corner, maybe mixed with a few DJs, you know, to mix the whole totality of it. And just let the fellas be on time. One point that nobody covered is where a DJ could play for 5 hours, you know, press a button and sip a few beers and watch the children go by. Steel band men it's difficult to ask them to stand up on a corner and play exactly for 5 hours without going for a breeze for half an hour and coming back. So you have to work out a recruiting system where guys would take over from guys, the music wouldn't stop, you know, and exactly would these fellas get refreshments, what kind of things are done, you know, the whole thing doesn't break down. So it just got, they just have to sit down and plan it a little better with the Steelpan in mind, you know, his effort in mind. Yeah.
Again, Junior, thank you very much for your contributions, and I wish you well and urge you to continue doing it, and I know you will.
Yeah, well, as long as I'm able to do some little thing, I will. Yeah.
Say hello to Tello for me.
Oh, definitely I will. Okay.
All right. I've been speaking with Junior Pouchet, the leader of Silver Stars Steel Orchestra. He's now in Orlando, Florida, with the Disney World. This is Von Martin in Port of Spain, Trinidad.